Blessings. Hi, I'm Dr. Lisa Rojas Flores, again, a clinical psychologist and professor at Fuller Theological Seminary. We are here to continue our conversations on the impacts of our crisis, migration crisis, and mental health, and to move forward the conversation a bit more as to what is it that the church can do in a situation such as this. So what we're going to be talking today is about how to set systems in place that will promote the flourishing of our migrant communities, particularly in our congregations, and particularly those that are affected by trauma, by offering trauma-informed care. Before I define what we are, what that is, I want to highlight, I want you to imagine the epicenter of an earthquake, because I think all of us, by virtue of being in California or any other part of the world, actually, we probably have experienced in one way or another an earthquake of some magnitude, some closer to the epicenter than others. But I think that image can help you understand that those that are in the middle, in the epicenter, where that earthquake happens, will be more affected than the ones that are a little farther away. Or much farther away, that they not witness it personally or heard about it, but they just, witness it indirectly or indirectly, but are more hearing about it. And so those are all levels of exposure that are very important for us to keep in mind when we're trying to understand how we are going to come along and support folks that are impacted by potentially traumatic events or stressful events that have significant impacts in their lives. So keep in mind that image of that epicenter and the different rings around the epicenter in terms of exposure, because again, those are very important in formulating some systems of care. I keep that in tandem with the different phases of the migration crisis and the different reactions that are associated with each phase of the migration crisis. Because again, those are nice frameworks that are helping us understand and triage as to who needs what kind of accompaniment. Some need shorter term, some shorter term, a little more intense in the beginning and less so later on, and some for some the accompaniment has to happen long term and intensely through several months and perhaps years. But the good news is that as a church, we are well poised to serve our immigrant community in times such as these that are tough and difficult, are generating a lot of stress and potentially traumatic events, because the church has very unique spiritual resources that have an eternal value that can really we can offer the immigrant, and we all know this is why we're doing this course. But the church is well positioned to create structures of care and support within the church and outside the church for this to support the immigrant community. And so within the church, and also to connect by virtue of being this the church, you can connect to other networks of services, both for physical health, mental health, for other services that can complement the accompaniment that we are offering our community, to be able to meet the needs of and the necessities of immigrant population. One of the things, there are three crucial components when one is offering counseling during a time of crisis, and one of them is you don't need to provide therapy, you don't need to talk too much, you just need to provide some basic support and to validate in meaning to name the crisis, to recognize it, to say, yes, this is a very difficult time. Yes, we have all these anti-immigrant policies. Yes, ICE is speaking on people. To validate the situation, not candy code it, and in the midst of that validation, to also provide the support. Support by being there, coming alongside, saying, yes, this is a bad situation, but we can move forward. You're not crazy. You begin to educate. You begin to say, no, the symptoms that you're experiencing, that's not because you're crazy. That's because it's associated with stress. You're stressed out so much that your body is responding this way or that way. Let me educate you about depression, about symptoms of anxiety, about symptoms of trauma, so that you don't take it upon yourself as you are the only one that experiences this. And in fact, we have some services that we can provide to you, some supports to help you on this situation. And the other essential component is obviously to advocate in terms of recognize the needs of the person in that moment of crisis, and to connect them with the appropriate services, to advocate that they get what they need from assistance in mental health if they need that, or basic needs and so forth. Those are essential components that we all must keep in mind, and sometimes we tend to think that it has to be this very magical, complicated formula when someone is experiencing crisis, but those are three essential components: validate, educate, advocate, to keep those in mind. But one thing that I do want to make sure that you begin to recognize as a church is that that is serving the immigrant community, is that there is plenty of trauma, and so there is some pillars of trauma-informed care that are very important to keep in mind as you develop a system of care within the church. And that is, it's very important that the church becomes a place that provides security. That is a main pillar of trauma care. If you are not feeling safe, you are not going to let your guard down, which is what happens in trauma, because you're always on the alert that something bad is going to happen. So if you if your church cannot provide that safety in the way that is designed, in the services, in the confidentiality it provides, it's going to be very hard for a person to thrive in such an environment. So providing a sense of security, very important. In the sense of connection, that is another pillar that is extremely important. We are designed to be in community. God designed us to be in community because He knew that's how healing happens. And in that connection, in that community, we can accompany, we can pray, we can hold each other accountable. You know about the symptoms, you'll be checking out. Are you getting out of bed? If you're very depressed, how's it going? Are you going out to exercise? Are you being able to have come to church? What can I do to help you out? If they're isolated because they are traumatized or they're depressed, to be able to provide some accompaniment by going to visit them, or connect them with other friends and other people in the church that can help them out. So providing security, connection are two main pillars, and those pillars are also helping helping the person to manage the strong emotions. Remember, we live in a time right now that is evoking a lot of strong emotions in many people, to the point that they're experiencing symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression, and for some, they had experienced traumatic events that dysregulate them in multiple ways, and the emotions are very intense, and they need to learn to manage them, to be able to calm themselves, and again, in a place that's safe, in a place of community, they can learn to manage some of those strong emotions. And that is why it's important to learn about trauma and some of the symptoms, some of the things that you can do. We are providing you with a number of resources so you can learn about childhood traumatic stress, some of the symptoms, some of the strong reactions, so that you can understand that some of these reactions are not towards you as a pastor, towards you as a leader, towards the church, but they are part and parcel of what trauma is. And you are then able to provide some specific guides and supports and referrals if needed. And then the promotion of hope and dignity. And I think the church is particularly well placed to do this. We hold the hope that God has given to us, and we also recognize the dignity in every human being and God's image in every human being, and we definitely can foster that, and we can intercede for one another. Those are pillars that are very crucial in promoting trauma care for anybody afflicted by very strong situations related to the migration crisis or related to their journey to this country. One last thing that I want to emphasize is that it is important for us to also keep in mind that there are different levels of support and intervention, psychosocial intervention, that need to be provided in these kinds of situations where there's trauma. That we need to be able to recognize that everybody needs basic services and security. That is a must. And when I said basic services, I'm thinking good health, good food and nutrition, shelter. Those are basic needs. If those are not met, it's hard to build upon that. So the church then is important. It's important for the church to build the networks to be able to address those needs, those basic needs, those services that they need. But then they're all above that. There are the services that are support services to families and communities that are more general, and that are important to be able to provide in terms of confidentiality, places to be, support, connection that I talked earlier. That's very important, that ought to be provided for everyone. To be checking out on what kind of signals and potential vulnerabilities they might have, so that you can educate, provide some systems of care for them. But to also think that within that those groups, those families and communities in your church, you may have also that those groups that have specific vulnerabilities and that will require more intense care. And that we alluded to some of those earlier in our lessons, with women and children as having triple vulnerability due to their gender, due to the age. So you need to identify who are in the church, those in positions of more vulnerability, which will demand a little bit more intense care, more focalized, more specific care, and oftentimes care that may require some specialized services like mental health services to support them a little bit more due to the exposure that they might have had to potentially traumatic events. Very important, because if you keep this in mind, that will help you triage, understand that that some might need a little bit more services, more intentional care than others, and that having a good understanding about what some basic principles of crisis intervention, basics, recognition of basic mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, and cumulative stress, as well as traumatic stress, will help you understand, triage, plan, and create a system of care that's informed by the knowledge and trauma and how it affects all our aspects of a person. The church is well poised to serve our community in a time of crisis. It just behooves us as a community of Christ to understand our role, to recognize the complexity of the social problem that we have, to hold in tandem the integral aspect of health that includes not just the spiritual aspect, but also the physical, the emotional, the social, and the behavioral part of ourselves. And to be able to create those systems of care that will foster flourishment in our community. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you next week. We'll be talking about taking care of ourselves as those that are accompanied, those in need. Very important not to keep that out of the equation, because we all need to be. We're all part of the body of Christ. Take care of yourselves, and see you next week. Blessings.